Hello, welcome to Theatre.Reviews with Paul Seven. I'm here at the Noel Coward Theatre to see Slave Play. Is London ready for this, says the publicity. We're trigger warned, about racist language, sexual violence, and of course, a naked Kit Harington. There's even a high-tech solution to stop you taking a picture of Kit with his kit off. Piece of sticky paper to stick over the camera on your phone. So, is this the most shocking play in the West End? Keep watching and I'll tell you exactly what happens. But only watch this review if you don't mind a large number of spoilers. To avoid confusion, I should tell you there are no production photos available of the first and last acts, only the middle one. But I've inserted those throughout the entire review. Okay, I wasn't shocked, but then I do have a high threshold of shockability. If you're of a more sensitive disposition, this may not be the play or indeed the video for you. And more to the point, I will be revealing a number of plot twists which may not be shocking, but if you're intending to see slave play, will spoil the intended surprises. Talking of surprises, I was surprised to find that slave play is primarily a comedy. So first, Clint Ramos' set. You immediately notice that the back of the stage is covered in mirrors. This means that you can see some of your fellow audience members, plus a painting of a Southern States plantation master's house that's fixed to the front of the circle. Why the mirrors? I don't know. Maybe it's so you can see how many black people are in the audience, and the answer is definitely more than usual in a West End theatre. Or maybe so you can see who's finding the discriminatory language funny and who's uncomfortable with it. Or maybe, given that a large amount of the percentage of the audience is white and the slave master's house appears to be in our midst, it's to remind us that this play is intended to be about us, white people as well as black people, even if we think it isn't. Work is the name of the first act. A couple appear, played by Kit Harington and Olivia Washington. She's Denzel Washington's daughter, by the way. Now, some of the Broadway cast have come over, along with original director Robert O'Hara, but both these actors are new to the play. We seem to be in a pre-Civil War or antebellum southern state. She's a black slave, but gyrating to a song called Work as she does her chores, which does seem a little strange. He's a white overseer, but not a slave master, as he's at pains to point out. And there's a sexual relationship there which he dominates and she submits. He throws a melon on the floor for her to eat, and he describes it as a watermelon. She corrects him, pointing out that it's a cantaloupe. Cue the poster, which cleverly turns a melon into a sexual image. Now, this does seem slightly off-kilter, as she appears to be more like his equal, maybe even taking the lead. Nevertheless, as instructed, she does eat it off the floor, and then the scene ends with him eating her. In the second scene, a mature Southern belle seduces a mixed race, or mulatto as she describes him, servant, who could pass for white. She produces a family heirloom, a large black dildo. Yes, you heard me right, which he proceeds to use on him. Now, the sex in this production is all simulated, but it's pretty graphic. What I wasn't expecting was it to be laugh-out-loud funny. Well, or not, depending on your sensibilities. But, you know, the stilted Southern accents and the porn movie dialogue made this play more like a carry-on film. Maybe Carry On in the Cotton Fields. Or perhaps Carrying Up the Khyber would be most appropriate. Anyway, it is now fairly obvious that there is some kind of role play going on here in which fantasies are being acted out, but it could still just about be early 19th century America. Scene 3 and couple number 3. 2 men, one black, one white. The white man is shifting bales of cotton. He's an indentured servant who is dominated and abused by his black boss. Act 1 culminates with all 3 couples having sex on beds side by side. Then Kit Harington's character calls out, "Starbucks," which turns out to be a safe word, and everyone stops. 2 women with clipboards enter, and we move from farce to satire. A reminder that there will be more revelations to come, and if you don't want to know too much about what happens in slave play, maybe now's the time to stop watching and go see it. So to Act 2, called Process. It turns out that all 3 couples are on the 4th day of a therapy group. It's the fantasy day, hence the title, Slave Play. The black partners are suffering from anhedonia, the first of many conditions I certainly hadn't heard of. Some of these conditions are made up, but anhedonia does exist, and put simply, it's lack of arousal. They gather for discussion and analysis, led by the two researchers played by Chalia La Tour and Irene Sofia Lucio, who are both from the Broadway cast. They turn out to have encountered the same problem in their own relationship, which they believe can be overcome using what they call antebellum sexual performance therapy. Well, this begins an initially hilarious satire as they spout more and more psychobabble while being at times oversensitive to the feelings of the others, and then at other times ignoring them, sometimes shutting down people for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and at others embracing whatever is said. Now, you might think, as I did at this stage, that these couples are simply incompatible or bored with their relationship. Not so, say the therapists. They maintain that these black people are feeling the legacy of their ancestors having once been slaves and subject to white imperialism, and that this affects their sexual relationship with their white lovers. And further to that, acting out their fantasies involving slavery helps. I suspect this extreme kind of unaccredited group therapy is more familiar to Americans than us British. In fact, it's only a few months ago that I was at the National Theatre watching Infinite Life, another American play about a group of people being conned by bogus therapy. Now, I was amused at first by this central and dominant part of slave play, but it seemed like a satirical sketch stretched out until it stopped being funny. A bit like when a pleasant hug carries on until you feel trapped in the embrace. After a while, I began to wonder how much more humour could be wrung out of these parodies of therapists, no matter how well the actors were nailing their techniques. I started to wish there was a safe word I could call out to get us on to the next scene. After all, the play's over 2 hours long without an interval. Then, despite, rather than because of the therapists, the black characters overcome their difficulty in talking about their emotions, which the therapists describe as racialized inhibiting disorder and alexithymia, guess which term was invented, and begin to recognize the true root of their problem, different in each case, but with something in common. Now, at this point, I need to say again, I'm about to reveal a plot development, including what happens when Kit Harington ends up naked, which you might prefer to be a surprise if you're going to see slave play for yourself. Now, before I continue, just a reminder that you can read my reviews and my summaries of other critics' reviews on my website, Theatre.Reviews. So, as the discussion progresses, it becomes clear that the white people are doing a lot of the talking, even though the sessions are supposed to be for the benefit of their black partners. And particularly funny in this respect is the way a middle-aged woman, Alana, acted with a wealth of shocked facial expressions by Annie McNamara from the Broadway cast, constantly speaks for Philip. He's played by British actor Aaron Heffernan. Now, she says she doesn't even think about his colour, until he eventually speaks up and declares that he's been mistaken in thinking that his ability to pass for white is a good thing, and that he's at his most fulfilled when he's seen as being black. He mentions that he was excited by the way they met, when he was brought in by her then husband to fulfill the latter's cuckold fantasy of seeing his wife have sex with a black man. Then there's Gary, played by British actor Fisayo Akinade, eventually seeing that he was wrong to regard a white partner as a kind of prize. And Dustin, a flamboyant actor, played for laughs by James Cusati-Moyer, who acted the part on Broadway, he doesn't want to think of himself as white. Gary becomes furious that this attitude denies the importance of his own ethnicity. It's one of the most powerfully emotional moments in a play that is otherwise more often melodramatic than realistic. Kit Harington's Jim, a British white man, is the most sceptical of this so-called process and says that he's uncomfortable with the role of playing a slave master. He observes that his partner regards him as a virus. And this is a turning point for Kanisha, played by Olivia Washington, who recognises that her anhedonia is not to do with her fantasy about being a slave, but because she does see white people as a virus. So at its heart, this play is about an ongoing power struggle between white and black people. Slavery may be the supreme example of that, but in the famous quote by J.M. Benjamin, everything is about sex except sex, which is about power. So these sexual relationships are intended to illustrate that because white people are used to a society in which they are supreme, they just take it for granted, and they fail to see that they are part of this power struggle that has caused their black partner's sexual inhibition. The final act, called Exorcise, sees another change of gear. This time the comedy, which had already faded, becomes a genuinely disturbing drama. We're back in the bedroom with the couple who opened the play. Kanisha asks Jim to listen, which he does, as she explains to him that he needs to recognise that he as a white man carries this so-called virus because he's inherited a legacy of imperialism, colonialism, and of course enslaving other races. Then in a gesture which I took to mean that this time he wasn't simply putting on a costume to play a part, he takes off all his clothes. Now the lighting's a little subdued as he walks around the bed, but it's clear that his body is completely exposed, just as his deepest feelings are now fully acknowledged and revealed. He once again goes through the ritual of treating her as a slave, but this time with a new sincerity, flinging her, fully clothed, on the bed, on her front, and climbing on top of her. His aim is not to pleasure her, as in the first scene, but to force himself upon her. All through this, we focus on her calm face and, via the mirrors, and thanks to the bleaching effect of a bright light, at his very white buttocks rising and thrusting. It's brutal, yet when it's over, she thanks him. But because she's looking at the audience, it seems that she's also thanking those of us who are white for listening and perhaps recognising our racial heritage. Mr. Harington does well to convey a character who goes from confident to confused to broken. And Ms. Washington acts with passion. But like the rest of the excellent cast, they are portraying characters who too often are ciphers rather than real human beings, and who offer melodrama in place of emotion. Now, I accept that slave play may mean more to Americans whose experience of race is different to the British one, so it may not have hit me as forcefully as intended. But for me, the points about white power that Jeremy O. Harris makes in slave play, while interesting and provocative, take too long to emerge and are too laboured, and they're less effective than they might be because the narrative is so obviously subservient to his agenda. But on the plus side, there is much to enjoy in the mixture of carry-on romp and a satire of the psychotherapy industry. I give slave play 3 stars. I hope you found this review useful and interesting, and if you did, please like, comment and subscribe to this channel so you'll be the first to know about my future reviews. You can also read my reviews and my reviews of other critics on my website, Theatre.Reviews. And you can follow me on the usual social media. Thank you for watching.